welcome to the Hunt Backcountry Podcast. This is episode number 419, and today our guest is Zach. He is one of you guys, a listener of the show, and we are joined today for a before and after the hunt story. Zach is going on a western hunt. He's an adult-onset hunter from the east, and he's going with some family, and they're also going guided, which is unique. We've told a lot of before and after stories, but very few. I can actually only think of maybe one that's actually been a guided hunt. So this is a great story to hear about why they chose to go guided, how Zach has been preparing, some advice on what he can get out of a guided hunt, and we dive into some nitty-gritty on gear, logistics, his 7mm PRC, which is a hot rifle and hot cartridge that you guys may want to hear about, and a whole lot more. So again, thank you guys as always for tuning in. I love sharing these episodes. It's going to be so fun to talk to Zach again later this fall after this hunt. It is in Montana for a rifle combo. So deer and elk are on the table. And again, it's not just Zach, it's with some of his family as you hear about. So there's a lot of opportunity for success and learning for Zach. And we get to join him in the experience and learn right alongside him as well. So thanks for tuning in. As always, if you guys have any questions for us, you can send an email to podcast@exomountaingear.com. But right now, let's go ahead and dive into this conversation with Zach. Well, Zach, man, glad to have you on the podcast today. Super excited to share before the hunt today and then hear about this adventure that's going to happen and chat with you later this fall after it does. But before we get into that, you just want to start with like a basic introduction background so listeners have some context of who you are.
Yeah, sure. And thanks for having me, Mark. My name's Zach. I live in southern New Jersey, grew up right outside of Philadelphia. Do primarily hunting out in western PA where I have some family and everything like that. And I'm relatively new to hunting. I started roughly 5 years ago, and this year I had the opportunity to go hunt out west for the first time, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah. So it's all you're hunting the last 5 years has all been whitetail stuff out there on the East Coast?
Yeah, primarily. So I'm fortunate that my uncle, who's been hunting for probably 50 years now, has some property out in western Pennsylvania. So I got into bow hunting originally, and I was very fortunate. The past 5 years, I went 3 for 5 on some bucks. So really good start to my hunting career. But I really started to pick up the rifle last year with it. But it's been primarily whitetail hunting. I've been getting into watching videos of hunting out west, and that's just kind of drew me in of like, man, I got to get out there and chase an elk. There's nothing like it. It seems like so. Yeah, but it's been primarily whitetail hunting.
Yeah. At 25, what kind of like spurred you to get into it? Because it sounds like you've had some, at least maybe potential, if you wanted to do it earlier, maybe with family that you could have.
No, you're 110% right. It was one of those things where like I wanted to try something new and I had access to it, right? And I just, I grew up in the suburbs of Philly, as I mentioned, and there's not a ton of hunting opportunity around here. So it was just hard to get out west. Excuse me, when I say west, I mean western PA. And do things like just get out to hunt and everything. And I don't know, my dad really wasn't into it. My uncle was, which is my dad's older brother. But I don't know, I just never really took a shine to it. And then my buddy was like, hey, we should get into archery. Around 25. So shout out to my buddy Steve. And I was like, okay, cool. Let's go. And let's go to the local pro archery shop. Let's get fitted out, all that good stuff. And I fell in love with it instantly. I've always been kind of the guy that, I mentioned to you before we jumped on the podcast, but I played football in college, and, I competitively power lifted and always sought something that challenged my, my innate drive to accomplish something, right? Or challenge myself with something and try to better myself. So this kind of fit that void perfectly. And like, I was very fortunate that I had success in my first year of bow hunting. Like I got my buck the first year, it's literally first shot I ever took at an animal. And I was beyond ecstatic and fortunate. And I was just hooked ever since then. And I can tell you, I'm never going back.
That's awesome, man. So you hunted archery for a few years, and then I think you said last year, I know what somewhat recently went to rifle. Was there something that spurred that on, or just created a, hey, I can hunt rifle season? It's just a new opportunity.
It's a combination of both. So I was planning this trip that I'm sure we'll get into out west. We started about 2 years ago. So I knew that I had an upcoming rifle hunt in 2023 out west. And I was like, well, I should probably start shooting a rifle, right? That would probably make a lot of sense. Get some trigger time, get to the range, hopefully, have an opportunity to harvest an animal in rifle season, at least in Pennsylvania, and go from there. And I finally kind of had my first rifle all set up. It was just a Browning X-Bolt 300 Win Mag. I threw a Zeiss V4 on there, which is, in my opinion, a really nice piece of glass. And last year, I was able to take a doe at 292 yards. So that was a really nice start. And yeah, I don't know. I just kind of I just wanted to get into rifle hunting and expand my horizons.
Yeah, nice. So the trip this year, it sounds like you've known about for a couple of years, kind of put the plan together. It's you and your dad and some of your uncles, but give us
Correct.
the big picture on what it is, and then maybe rewinding to 2 years ago or whenever that was exactly, like how this idea kind of came together and you got serious about it.
Yeah, no, I guess I'll start with how the idea came together 2 years ago. So this was when I really 2 years ago is when I really kind of got hooked on hunting. I harvested my second buck and I shot this really, really, I was very fortunate, just a very nice white-tailed deer. And I was just like, man, I need to get out west. I need to do something. And at that time I was 27, 28 years old, turned 30 earlier this year. And I just said to my dad, I was like, what are your thoughts on, kind of like gifting each other like a hunt out west when you turn 60 and I turn 30? It's kind of like a once in a lifetime trip where kind of we get all together. Your two brothers can come out with us. My dad's older brother has been hunting out west for 50 plus years now. My dad's younger brother does not hunt, but he wants to come out on the trip. And then my cousin was fortunate enough to join in with us. We're lucky to have him tag along. We're excited for that as well. And he was kind of thinking about it, and he goes, you know what? Yeah, let's do it. My dad went out west prior. He hunted antelope with my uncle. I think it was maybe 4 or 5 years ago. And they were able to harvest an antelope then. And, I think it was just as simple as having that conversation and being like, why don't we do a once in a lifetime trip and really get out there, and let's make the most of it by driving out. So my uncles live out in out in Pittsburgh. So we're going to drive out there, and then we're just going to start a road trip out. It's going to take about a week to drive out, and we're going to go see a bunch of national parks. We'll go out through South Dakota. We'll see the Badlands, Mount Rushmore. We're going to swing down to the Tetons, up through Yellowstone, and then we're going to finish in Bozeman, which is where we are actually hunting, right in the Bridger Bowl area, right outside of Bozeman. So that's really the trip. And I'm excited. Honestly, I don't know what I'm more excited for, the hunting or the road trip, because I've been out west before. My wife and I have gone on numerous, hiking vacations. We went out west for our honeymoon. So, I just love it out there, and I just can't wait to get out and hopefully harvest an animal.
Dude, what a special thing to be able to do that with your dad, uncles. Your dad gets to do it with his brothers, looping in your
Yeah.
cousin. Man, that just makes it awesome. That family coming together, these guys taking this much time just to be together and make these memories, it's going to be pretty dang priceless.
That's the goal. And that's what I kind of told him. I was like, hey, it's just one of those things where I don't know if we're ever going to do this again. And this is the opportunity and the time to do it. And, we are fortunate enough to have the time and resources to make this happen. And I'm over the moon about it. I've been I've had that date circled on my calendar for 2 years now, and like everything that I do, both personally and professionally, has been working towards that just because of how excited I am about it.
Man, so cool. It truly feels like an honor to like be able to kind of share some of this story and just hear about it. Like, and not even share it, but me personally, just like hear about this adventure, even after the fact. I'm so looking forward to it. So it's cool.
I appreciate that. Thanks.
So one thing that I mean, definitely for you plays into the story, not necessarily so much for necessarily the listener or the hunt, but I'm just kind of curious to hear where your head is at. Is you said you've had this date circled on the calendar for a couple of years now. What you didn't know a couple of years ago is that you'll essentially have about a 2 or 3 month old baby, your first at the time. Did that change anything, or did your wife have any like, hey, you have this hunt, but like we're gonna have a newborn type thing?
Yeah, that was definitely it's been a conversation. One, I do have to say, Mark, and my wife would kill me if I didn't say this, but she is absolutely amazing. She has been super supportive of literally everything about this trip. We've obviously had it on the calendar for 2 years and everything like that. We found out that she was pregnant in early December of 2022, which puts her due date August, and then we're hunting late October for opening day rifle out in Montana. So, as you mentioned, I'll have roughly a 2 month old at that point. Originally, the trip was, 3.5 weeks, drive out, hunt 5 days, drive back, right? And, we were able to, sit down and have a conversation and kind of compromise where I'll now kind of just drive out, do the hunt, and, hopefully, obviously I want to spend as much time out with as possible, but, if I'm able to harvest an animal early, then fly back and get back to her and get back to him, and go from there. And, shout out to her for being so awesome about it because, I do not want to leave them. Like I literally told her, I was like, look, I'll fly out the day before the hunt. I'll fly into Bozeman, and then I'll do the hunt and then I'll get right back. It's okay. And she did look at me and just said, hey, this is literally a once in a lifetime trip. You get to spend this time with, the men of your family, the men that raised you. And like, I felt so blessed and fortunate that she said that, and she's on board. And thankfully, between her mom, my mom, my sister, her sisters, like we have a great support network. But I guess to answer your question, it's really hard. Like I really obviously want to be there. He's 2 months old, so thankfully he's still, at that point he'll still be. A newborn, right? Like he's still an infant and he doesn't really know much except, eating and sleeping, right? So that's kind of like a good thing, but like, man, I am just like, I love him so much already and we haven't even met him yet. And, it's just going to be really hard to leave him for that time. But if there is one thing to, be fortunate enough to go on a 2 week trip and do and get away from him and her for a little bit, it's this, right? So it's just, I have very mixed emotions, right? I'm going to miss them dearly, but man, my wife's a rock star. So I'm very fortunate.
Yeah, I can relate a bit to that because I not started hunting, but started taking like extended trips and out of state trips when we had our first and when she was a baby. So I was very similar. And for me back then, and even still to this day, like I realized how good it is for me to be able to do things like that. And it helps me
Right.
be like a better man and a father when I am at home.
Right.
Just because I get so much personal value and, even insight and things like that, just on life on these types of trips. So I'm sure it will be the same for you and that the time you get to spend, as you said, I mean, the once in a lifetime thing, to me, hunters throw that around a lot. And to me, a lot of times there's
Mm-hmm.
an asterisk on that because it's a phrase of speech. Uh, but for this, man, like for you to not, if it was just your hunting trip, then I'd say, yeah, probably not once in a lifetime, but you're going to do this again.
Right.
But the fact that you get to do it with your dad and uncles and, all the whole thing coming together, it truly is probably a once in a lifetime thing. So be sure to, cherish that for what it is. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, I will. And it's one other thing, I just wanted to add real quick. I was listening to the your guys' most recent Final Friday. I forget the gentleman's name that I believe it was Jake was interviewing, but
Probably Jeff.
he yes, it was Jeff. You're
Okay.
correct. Yes. And he was basically mentioning like Jake kind of asked a question that was adjacent to kind of the one that you asked. And I thought what Jeff was saying about, just like yes, he's going to dearly miss his family and he wants to get back to them, but like he's all in, those 9 months out of the year. And then when he is out in the woods, his sole focus is on that, because if he focuses on that, he can get the job done. He can then get back home to them faster. Right. And that just really resonated with me, that like just have the ability to kind of have that mind shift and focus right on the task at hand, while also compartmentalizing, missing your family and everything. So just something I want to throw in.
Yeah, cool. So what we didn't mention yet is you guys are doing this trip guided. And I just love to
Yes.
hear about kind of that decision. Was it even on the table to try to do a DIY trip, or kind of how that came together?
Yeah, no, frankly, the DIY stuff was not on the table at all. I mentioned earlier, my uncle has been hunting out west for 50 plus years. And throughout that time, he developed a really great friendship and relationship with Montana Outfitting Company. I believe Chris Faber owns that. And that's who we're going through. Because my uncle he's taken his clients and, various people out there. We were just very fortunate that, there was an opening and availability in 2023 to go with them. And then, honestly, at the same time, just from like, I guess, I don't, I guess I'll call it physical limitations. Let's just say my dad and my uncles don't exercise like I do. So like I think a guided hunt was just kind of made a little bit more sense of just being able to get in the position, to harvest an animal. So we kind of had this natural in with the guide. And then at the same time, I just think a guided hunt was just better suited for our group.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What questions have you, I guess, either been asking of your uncle, who it sounds like has done this before, or of the guide outfitter? Like, I'm just curious on the basics of, is this a horseback hunt? Are you guys going to be broken up into groups? Are you going to be at some sort of cabin or more of like a wall tent base camp? Like, kind of give us a
Sure.
rundown at least of what you're expecting or what you do know about kind of that aspect of this.
Yeah, yeah. So there's going to be four hunters out of the five of us go. So I believe we're going to be split into two groups of two, and we'll each have a guide. So it'll be, one guide for two dudes. And, each day is just going to be, a fresh hunt where we actually have kind of like, just a cabin, I guess you could call it, like just a house, I guess. That's kind of right, 20, 30 minutes outside of Bozeman. That'll be like home base for us. But from my understanding of, the conversations that I've had, we'll just simply be getting in a truck, going up some logging roads, getting to elevation and just glassing, right? And seeing where these elk are, where the mule deer are, and then hopefully maneuvering into position. So then we are able to, take an ethical shot and go from there. And then, questions I've been asking my uncle is just like, as silly as it sounds, like what to expect out there. And like his answer, and I'm sure everybody's answer is like, well, it really depends, right? Like it depends on so many different factors, right? Like it depends on where we see the elk. Like, are they going to be close to the road? Are we going to have to go 5 miles deep? Who knows, right? Is it snowing? Is it raining? Is it this? Is it that? Right? Is it going to be uncharacteristically hot? Right? Is it going to be absolutely freezing? Like so many different factors that go into it. So, I think my mentality going into it, right, has been more of like control what I can control, right? And that's like my ability with the rifle. That's my physical fitness. That's like planning the trip out ahead of time. Like I can't control what the weather does, obviously, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think that's kind of the mentality going into this.
You mentioned deer and elk. So there's five guys, but as you mentioned, one of them's along for the ride. So there's four hunters. Do all of you guys have combo tags?
We do, yes.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah, so I don't know how the hell we're going to get the meat back home if we do all our successful in the car. That's
Yeah.
what we're trying to figure out logistically. Like, I think we're going to take, like just a big truck out with like a trailer towed behind us. But like, I'm just thinking logistically, you get a couple 100 pounds of meat just from elk alone. And if there's 4 elk, like how? So
Hmm.
we're going to cross that bridge when we get there. I keep going back to my uncle just because he's kind of been like the go-to guy for a lot of this. Um, he did this trip literally 2 years ago with some of his friends. So they were successful with harvesting an elk. They were successful with driving it back across the country, back to the Pittsburgh area where they all live, and stuff like that. So we know what we're doing. It's just a matter of like, hey, how are we going to be successful? How are we going to get home? Do I fly home with my meat and you guys drive it back? Right. We'll figure that out as we get closer.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, between having your uncle who's, done this and then just being able to rely on the outfitter who has worked obviously with
Mm-hmm.
hundreds or thousands of clients, you're going to have great resources, at hand. But it will be fun to talk about that in the after podcast and just kind
Yeah.
of hear what
Yeah.
you learned and what worked well and what didn't and all that. So that will be cool for sure.
Yeah. No doubt.
For you personally, do you have uh like a strong affinity towards wanting an elk over a deer, mule deer, or vice versa, or just to, do you not, I don't want to say not care, but do you not have
Yeah.
like a
Yeah.
strong
Yeah.
preference of one over the other?
No, I definitely think I have a stronger preference of harvesting an elk over a muley. But obviously either or would be incredible. Like even if I just fill one, I guess we'll call it part of that tag, right? Like I would be more than happy with either or. I absolutely love Euro mounts, right? So like my goal is to harvest an animal and get a Euro mount. I'm not going to be picky. It's my first animal. Like as long as it's legal and like it's an ethical shot, like that's my mentality going into this, right? And like I would love an elk a little bit more, I think, than a muley, but at the same time, I can't be picky, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I mean, it jogs to mind. I just moved and so I don't have a bunch of taxidermy, but I just mainly have Euro mounts. And I was moving some Euro mounts and came to my first bull, which was it was the archery bull, and it's the smallest bull I've shot, but still it's like, man, it's special to me. Like it in a way it's not nearly as impressive to anyone else. It doesn't look as cool, in the house, but putting my hands on it again, I was like, if I think if I just had to give everything else up, even like bigger elk, like I would just want to keep that first.
It's funny. I feel the same exact way. So my first buck that I shot with my bow, I got a shoulder mount, right? And you look at it and you're like, oh, well, that's definitely a buck, but it's nothing like it's not that big, right? It's the legal 3 up because that's how you have to in the hunting unit I hunt out in Pennsylvania. They have to be 3 up on one side, right? And it's a little like tiny 6 point and but like the amount of pride that I feel when I look at that, I'm like, man, that just feels so good when I've shot bigger deer and nicer looking deer. But there's just something about that first one where you're just like, I can never let go of this. I just still got to convince the wife to hang it somewhere.
Yeah, wolves are sitting up our new house. We're having those discussions in our household as well.
Good luck to you.
Oh man. Um, yeah, what else, whether it's questions about the hunt or just your preparation for it. I mean, you've had a lot of time obviously to think about it. We talked 2 years, but what are some of the things you've done, whether that's, research and reading to learn about the species or the area? I mean, you can go to training gear, like take that where you want, but like what is this build up towards this hunt practically? What are some of the things you've been doing?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Well, one, just from like a physical fitness standpoint, I've just been working out, real hard and just getting prepared. I purchased a K3 in preparation back in, I think it was December of last year for this hunt. One, because I want to get the full experience and do a pack out and everything. But then two, frankly, I just really enjoy those type of exercises and movements, right? With the heavy pack on, either rucking or doing something like that. So I've been following the Mountain Tough. I know people in the industry are, it's kind of blown up recently, but they just have incredible workouts. So I've been doing that. From a gear standpoint, and I meant to ask you this, so I guess I'll ask it now. I'm in the market for some rain gear right now. I bought some, just Cabela's brand back when I first started about 5 years ago, and I wore, the full suit, Cabela's jacket and rain pants and everything like that. And it was just a real rainy day during rifle season last year, and it's just one of those things where I was still dry, but like that condensation was kind of like soaking through on my shoulders and stuff, if you know what I'm talking about, after
Hmm.
like a day of, wearing it. I was reading one of your guys' articles on like, not like breaking the bank on certain items. And like one of those items was a rain jacket that you guys recommended. So I just kind of want to get your perspective. Like, does it make more sense to just go with just getting a new rain jacket? You think I should go with a full set from, a brand out there? Like, for example, as we're recording this, like HooYu's doing a 30 to 40% off sale. And, I really enjoy their stuff. It fits me very well. So I don't know. I'm just curious to get your perspective on kind of rain gear and how you would approach that.
Yeah, for sure. It's going back to what you said earlier, it depends.
Yeah.
I think part of the reason we've tended to recommend, maybe it's this isn't like, maybe rain gear is not the best place to spend a lot of money at first, is it kind of goes back to like people packing their fears, right? Like people are afraid to get wet, and so they prioritize rain gear at times maybe more than they should. That's all contextual based on when and where you're hunting. It would be far different for someone, who lives in Western Washington than Idaho, right? Or even honestly,
Mhm.
central Idaho versus northern Idaho. So
Sure.
there's all obviously asterisks and context and all that. And then even when it comes to quality rain gear, um, just like use two examples that I have and use would be like the Sitka Dew Point is a great lightweight packable set that if I'm backpacking is generally something I want to grab. Whereas if I'm in thicker country, rougher country, maybe more extreme moisture, like what I took on my mountain goat hunt, for example, would be something a bit burlier, um, just because of the brush and the exposure and things like that. So for that, I have the First Light Omen, for example. They're both high quality sets. They're also very different. So yeah, all that said to say, a lot can go into it. For your hunt, like in Montana, you guys, kind of hunting from the truck, or, you're not going to be out. So one, backpacking is not a concern. Um, the packability isn't as much of a concern because you're only out for the day.
Hmm.
And then also because you're only out for the day, you don't really have this chance of, hey, I got soaked today and I got to keep hunting tomorrow, but there's nothing I can do about it. Because on this hunt, you will have something you can do about it.
Sure.
You can get soaked today, get back to this cabin, lodge, what have you, and either be able to air dry, have a fire, or honestly, very likely they're going to have a dryer there, right? So, like,
Exactly.
you can
Right.
dry yourself out, you can dry your gear out. And so, because of all that, it's far less critical than on, say, a 10-day sheep hunt where you're like, you're soaked on day 3. There's no going anywhere. There's no drying out. There's no reprieve from that. Like
Right.
you're crawling in wet to a sleeping bag. So again, those are very different contexts. So all that said to say, I wouldn't, maybe even though your Cabela's rain gear wasn't perfect and you did wet out a bit in it, like maybe it's still fully sufficient for this trip just because, hey, I'm going to be able to get back and dry out even if I get a little bit wet, right?
Yeah. No, that's a really great point, and that's um, I was beyond just like hunting rain gear. I was frankly in the market anyways for like just an everyday rain jacket because mine's
Yeah.
10 plus years old. So like that's where kind of my mind was at, is like, and I think this is my general mentality with just gear in general, just because again, I do live on the East Coast. I do hunt southern New Jersey public land. I do hunt out west in Pennsylvania, right? Where like my gear, I'm just trying to be like super versatile. Like to your point, like I'm probably not going to go on a sheep hunt anytime soon, right? Just being realistic.
Mhm.
So for me, I'm always thinking like, where can I get the most versatility without spending tons of money, right? And like still get really, really good function out of this thing. And that's kind of my approach with every single piece that I've kind of accumulated over the last 2 years is like, where can I get the most versatility on top of function between everything that I have? So I appreciate you saying that.
And that's where I was going to go too. Of even though I recommended like maybe stick with your Cabela's rain gear for this trip. All that said
Mm-hmm.
to say, if you have the budget, like if you have a few $100 and you're like thinking towards the future of not only hunting at home, but other potential hunts, you mentioned QU, like to bring up their stuff. I don't have personal experience with it, but know a lot of guys who I trust, and who use like the QU Yukon set. So I
Mm-hmm.
have a high, a favorable opinion of that. Again, not based on my own experience, but just from guys I know and trust. So, like, if they have a great sale and like you have the funds for the QU Yukon, then consider it. And then going back to your point, especially with rain gear, but I tend to do this with a lot of layers, is like I would recommend getting that in a solid color so that you can use it
Yeah.
outside of hunting or more of an everyday rain jacket when it's required. So something like the QU Yukon would be a fantastic choice. Get it in a solid, use it for this trip, use it for a wet, blistery, windy day there running around town, and then you have it for future hunts. So it's
Sure.
always if you have the budget for it, something like that would be great.
Okay, cool. I appreciate that.
While we're on gear then, what have you acquired specifically for this trip?
I mentioned I really enjoy, kind of like Kuiu gear. I find that it fits me really well. So over time, I kind of have just, every month I maybe bought a new piece of gear, tried to wait till they're on sale. So, I've picked up things like their guide DCS jacket, their guide pant, their attack pant, and some of their like Peloton under merino wool layers. Because again, I do primarily my huntings, sitting in a tree stand or at least here in southern New Jersey because I don't really have a saddle or anything or a climbing stand. Frankly, it's just from the ground and scouting the area, trying to kick some deer up and kind of just like hunt from the ground and like a pseudo ground blind that I kind of find natural position, right? So I've tried to create or buy things that are versatile, as I mentioned. And like I found that like the attack pant is like the perfect all around pant for me. But then their guide pant does a really nice job keeping me warm when I'm sitting in a freezing tree stand. Let's see, what else have I got? I had an old pair of Danner pronghorns that I've been running. They're pretty nice. I mean, they've lasted me for 5+ years now. Getting in the woods, hiking, and just doing things like that. I have a couple just like I know going back to the article I referenced of like using cost-effective ways of kind of like saving, instead of spending tons and tons of money on like crazy base layers. Like I have like Under Armour insulated like zip up like leggings and like a quarter zip that like I wear it's like against my skin, and like frankly that thing keeps me so warm like I don't even have to worry about it. I mentioned some Cabela's rain jacket and pants that I have, and that's kind of about it. I kind of just like sourced like some more expensive pieces from Kuiu, and then I try to pair that with some things that are you can just walk into any like Dick's Sporting Goods and throw it on, right? I actually recently have bought some Stone Glacier gear. I think they're de Havilland pants, and then I have like it's like their mid-layer fleece zip-up hoodie with the hood. And I have to say, I am blown away by the Stone Glacier stuff. Like I wear that just to do yard work and, just kind of go around town, go to the range, and because they all come in solid colors, right? And the performance on those, I'm blown away by them. I know they're pricey too, but I was fortunate enough to have like a gift card and all that fun stuff. But like, highly recommend the Stone Glacier stuff. So I think my primary day to day when I'm out there, I'm probably going to be end up wearing those Stone Glacier pants with probably my Kuiu stuff on top, and then kind of go from there. So yeah, I would say that's about it.
How about you kind of mentioned like even the strategy of this hunt is like, hey, let's get some elevation, spend some time and look for animals. What do you have for optics?
Yeah, so I don't have a spotting scope or anything because frankly I have zero need for it where I live.
Hmm.
Right, like I legitimately
Agreed.
I know I said in my email, but like yeah, right, like I live at legitimately 90 feet of elevation. Like I can be at the Jersey Shore in an hour where I live. Like so what would I need a spotting scope for, right? So that's kind of like having the guide, right, is kind of
Hmm.
good. My I'll be honest with you, my binos, they're perfect for the whitetail woods. They're just some Vortex Diamondbacks 10 by 50s, so they're nothing fancy, right? They're a couple $100. Like they get the job done for me now. Out west, I mean, I'm gonna bring them with me, but my uncle has a pair of the Swaro range finding binos, which
Hmm.
are obviously, you know, I know you guys have mentioned them, some of the best on the market. So we'll have access to high quality glass while we're out there. But for me personally, I plan on bringing just the stuff that I kind of use for whitetail hunting, and then kind of, you know, working together with the guide and, you know, my uncle and whomever else to kind of, you know, hopefully cover up having, you know, say some nothing bad about Vortex, obviously, but you get what I'm saying. Is like there's a little difference between that and Swaro rangefinding binos. So,
Yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Well, I think it's great. Like you said, it's not everything rests on you and your binoculars on this hunt. You have
correct.
other hunters with you, you have the guide and all that. What I would say on that is, like when it comes to higher end gear, not just optics, but optics are a great example for this point of take what I'm trying to get is take advantage of comparing your binoculars to your uncle's and even your guides. So I would say is like, don't be afraid to ask your guide, like, hey, do you mind if I glass with your spotting scope or your binoculars or your what have you? And then same for any other hunter or someone in camp, like just take advantage of the opportunity to get behind
Mm-hmm.
that stuff and to really see like what are the differences. Or you may, like, let's say for a theoretical example, your uncle has those Swaro range finding binos and the guide has some Zeiss, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
you may, for you, find out you really really like one over the other, and then whether
Sure.
that's in a year or 3 years, when it comes to like, oh, I'm in a position to upgrade my binos, like you have some experience to fall back on, like in the field, not just running to Cabela's or something and looking at high end optics, or not just reading someone else's reviews, but just, you know, take advantage of that opportunity to, hey, I'm going to run what I have, but let me try and get some experience looking through other stuff.
Yeah, no, that's I really appreciate you giving that advice as well, because I totally agree with you. So like going back real quick to the rifle season last year, so I unfortunately missed a buck last year with my rifle, and I learned more from that experience than I did in the 5 years of hunting. Right. Thankfully, you know, he wasn't wounded. My uncle was able to actually shoot him right after I missed the shot. But long story short, the reason why I bring this up is like it was legitimately first light. Like I think like at the time, first light was maybe like I don't know 7:22 in the morning or something, right? For the Pennsylvania Fish and Wildlife regulations. So we were driving up on a 4x4 at the top of kind of like the west in Pennsylvania, and we were looking at like a slope right up a hill where old power lines used to be, and there was nice vegetation, and I knew instantly that like an animal was going to most likely be there. So we get out of the truck and or the 4x4 and we're looking, and I have my Vortex binos, right, the Diamondbacks, and he has the Swaro binos, and like my uncle goes, Zach, there's a buck right there, and I was like, where? Like I couldn't see him in the low light. And like he was like here, and he hands me the Swaros, and I literally picked him up instantly. And like again, I'm not like knocking Vortex, but just like at the end of the day, like those are just simply better binos, right? And you know, I that real life experience, like that was super eye opening to me. That like the Vortex Diamondbacks are more than sufficient for my needs and how I hunt currently, but like out like down the road, getting that hands-on experience of looking through those Swaros and being able to see just the clarity and everything like that. And if I want to get out west again, obviously maybe not this type of trip that we're doing, but like just down the road in the future, going out with some buddies or something like that, like definitely need to upgrade, right? So you know, I appreciate you saying.
That's a perfect example of just being able to get side by side and see the difference. Because
Yeah.
it's one of those things, not just with optics, almost with anything. Like it's easy to get in the internet hole of thinking, oh, I need this, I need that. And yeah, sometimes it's like, yeah, use what you have. Like eventually when you have the budget or need to upgrade, uh, hopefully you've had some experience to truly know at that point what you actually do and don't need.
Yeah,
Um,
100%.
Nice, man. Well, it sounds like, I mean, I asked about what have you kind of invested in from a gear perspective. You focused on clothing a lot, which I think is a great a great thing because on this hunt, you're not backpacking, it is guided. So some of the stuff in terms of other hunting gear, obviously tent, shelters, all that stuff's like out of the window. So it's cool that
Yeah.
like you have a solid system to just, hey, I'm going to
Hmm.
get out there, be comfortable, be warm, be able to sit out in glass if the conditions are rough. So I think it's a great thing that you've kind of focused on clothing. It's going to help you a lot, as you know, from your whitetail experience, be able to just sit out there and last. And that's going to be the same type of thing for this hunt. And on that point, like, don't discount how, um, I think how valuable your experience whitetail hunting is for this hunt, purely from the perspective of what it's like to sit, wait, and be patient.
Right.
And a lot of guys don't. But because of your whitetail hunting experience, you've certainly been there and done that. And for this type of hunt where you're sitting and glassing and just sometimes need to stay patient, I mean, you already have some experience that's going to be helpful in that regard.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I was kind of thinking along the same lines, and especially your comment about gear. Like even last year, like I probably logged a good 80 to 100 hours in the woods last year, and like I'm talking full day sits, and I was fortunate enough that like at no point was I getting cold. Right, like I was comfortable the entire time, and investing in good gear does make a difference. So it's just one of those things of doing it slow and steady, in my opinion, right? Not everybody has like tons and tons of money to blow on, these highly technical, expensive, gear that people use. But over time, it's just like acquiring a little bit at a time, trying to do what makes the most sense. And that's kind of that mentality I took.
Do you have, this is random, but comes to mind for this particular Montana hunt. Do you have a good system for gloves for keeping your hands warm? And part of what my head goes to is are related to my experience. When I whitetail hunt, I wear like a hand muff, right? Like the big pouch
Mm-hmm.
up in front, and
Yeah,
often
yeah.
we'll wear pretty lightweight gloves, especially because like especially when I'm bow hunting or even rifle hunting for that matter. I want the trigger dexterity, but I'll
Mm-hmm.
use really lightweight gloves and then keep my hands in a hand warmer hand muff, and that
Sure.
works fantastic. But if you go to Montana now, you're glassing, your hands are going to be out a lot more, right? They're going to be on binos, on the spotter. You're not going to be sitting there with them in this hand pouch. So it is one thing that comes to mind of if you haven't yet explored a system for, hey, let me keep my hands warm or dry or comfortable for this Montana hunt. Definitely have some options there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate you saying that. I actually when they were on sale, I grabbed a pair of the Kuiu. I believe they're called the Expedition gloves. And they're like a insulated, heavy, pretty honestly dexterous glove, given how kind of thick the insulation is on there. So I've been running that maybe the past 2 years while I've been bow hunting. And what I'll do is like, so obviously I shoot right handed. So I'll wear the glove on my left. And then kind of like I'll just simply drop my trigger finger or hand into like my pocket with like a hand warmer. And then I'll just sit there, holding the bow. And like, even with that, that cold bow, how cold that bow can get when it's freezing out and your hands holding it and everything like that. Like, I don't feel it through those gloves. So I think I should be okay.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be opposed to getting, looking at another pair too if needed.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you have good experience with those to go on. So I haven't used them,
Yeah,
so I won't comment at all, but they
sure.
sound like they could be sufficient for you.
Yeah, they're pretty nice gloves.
So this is a big leap in gear, but you mentioned in one of your emails you built a 7 PRC, which I partially just want to hear about because I would imagine that there's a lot of listeners interested. It's a hot cartridge right now and all the sexy newness, but Did you just convince yourself you need a new rifle after missing that buck last year or what?
Oh, that's what my buddy joked with me about too. I'll be honest with you. No, it wasn't that. It was just one of those things where I frankly had the opportunity to do so, more so than anything. And I was very fortunate that I had the funds and um, also my uncle's knowledge to fall back on. So like he's really big into building custom rifles and stuff like that, right? And um, my I don't know. I mentioned I had that 300 Win Mag, the Browning X Bolt. That's a nice rifle, right? But at the end of the day, like I had it out when we were hunting in that rain I mentioned earlier with the Cabela's rain gear, and I just like there was just something about it. Like I just didn't love the feel of it and everything like that. And I don't know. My mentality was just like, maybe I shot for something new. I don't know. But then at the same time, my uncle was like, hey, you should consider doing this because it's one of those things where it's like, I don't know. I'm a big proponent of like the old buy once, cry once mentality, right? Like if you invest in good gear, it's going to last you a long time as long as you take care of it and you do it right and you're smart about it and all that kind of stuff. So frankly, I just started doing research and I just kind of took the leap. I built it off of an Altera C2 Action, which is, kind of a newer action on the market. I know people normally run those REM 700s, right? And then they'll get them, machined and manufactured to precision, and then they'll build off that. But yeah, I just made the decision to kind of get an Altera C2 Action. And from there, I kind of just built it out. I threw a 22-inch Proof Sendero, barrel on there, running a Trigger Tech Special Remington 700 trigger, boring rifle, Super B TI, muzzle brake. I got an HS Precision bottom metal. And then I threw a Leupold VX5 3x15 with the 44 millimeter on to the actual rifle itself. And then the Hawkins Precision rings is what I'm running. And then with the bipod, I went with a Rugged Ridge Gen 2 bipod short. So, I'll be honest with you, like I'm very fortunate to have this rifle. Oh, and then I should say I got it Cerakoted after that. So it's, beyond being built out of good material. It's kind of impervious to weather and things like that now. I mean, this thing with factory ammo was shooting sub, half MOA groups. It's insane. Like I haven't shot a rifle. I grew up shooting rifles, right? But like I've never shot a rifle that like shoots like this. And just like I don't know if it's a mentality thing, to be honest with you, or what it is, but it just makes me feel more confident in my shooting. I don't know if that sounds crazy or not, but like I don't know. It's just something that in the back of my mind, I'm like, look, you spent a lot of time and money in putting, this thing together. And I feel like I have to elevate my game because I have this great tool that I'm using, but the tool is only as good as the person behind it. Right. So I have to elevate my game and I have to force myself to be better. And when I did miss that buck, that was more of user error on my part with messing with the scope power too much and zooming in a little too much and then rushing the shot and not taking, a nice deep breath and having a shot sequence, which I've been working on. Right. So it's kind of a combo of those two things. But, maybe the easy answer is, yeah, I just convinced myself that I missed a deer and I needed a new rifle.
Well, it sounds like a cool setup. Did I miss in there what stock you're using?
Oh yeah, sorry. I just realized I missed that. So I got a Mesa Remington Altitude. I think
cool.
they're Pure Precision. I think they rebranded as now.
Yeah.
And I got it in that Glacier camo color just because I enjoy the blue. So it's pretty nice rifle. I feel very fortunate to have it.
Yeah. Sounds like a great setup for sure.
Yeah,
Well, that's
and the
exciting,
7PRs. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark. I was just going to comment on the 7PRC itself too. I think with that caliber, I know you mentioned that it's new and shiny and people are loving it, and I just felt that was like the perfect combo between like a 3-inch Win Mag and like a 6.5, right? So like it was this perfect marriage where hand loading, I'm getting with 145s, getting 3,400 feet per second out of it. And with 170s, which is what I'm going to be shooting out there, hammer HHTs, the new tipped ones, right? I think we're getting almost 3,100 feet per second out of the rifle. So it's like this perfect combination of like right in between with not a lot of recoil. And like it's just a perfect rifle, in my opinion, for both whitetail, elk, and everything in between.
I'm kind of certainly in that camp with you. Some sort of 7 millimeter Magnum is a great do-it-all option for sure.
Yep.
I asked you if you kind of like had any questions for me on the podcast, just kind of going into it. And you had a bunch. We've touched on some. I will say though, just one thing that stood out to me looking over your questions is how, and this was before we had spoken and before I had even more context for the discussion we just had, but I love that you're going into this and it's a guided hunt, but you're so like hungry to learn, because a lot of your questions had to do with like you want to be able to pack an animal out even though it's a guided hunt. You want to know what it's like to break the animal down, process it, and do all that even though it's a guided hunt. So I just love that you're going into this not going, hey, this is just a hunt I'm going on. I don't need to know these things. The guide's here to do this, that, and the other thing. And I'm just there to show up and, pull a trigger.
Right.
So I just wanted to say, man, it's cool to see how hungry you are to learn. And on that, like, I would just recommend you don't be afraid to ask all the questions. Like there's, you can take that overboard and like constantly be asking like, why are we doing this? Why are we getting on the truck here? Why are we doing, you know what I mean? But
yeah.
When it comes to, especially success, right? Like when it comes to breaking down the animal, or maybe there's a shot and something doesn't drop and you guys are doing some tracking, like just being willing to engage with the guide. Cause a lot of guides are, I hate saying that because I have very limited experience. I've done one guided hunt because I had to with Alaska, non-resident
Mm-hmm.
requirements. So I don't
Yep.
want listeners to come off thinking I've done a bunch of guided hunts and have experience with it. So when I say a lot of guides, it's a unfair statement for me. I know guides. I've talked with guides. And a lot of times they, they're there and they're doing a job and they're more than willing to do everything, right? It's almost what I will say for you and someone with your perspective who wants to learn is I will just say that it is on you to engage with the guide with that attitude
Mm-hmm.
of, hey, I'm here to learn. If you don't mind, like if we're tracking or if we're breaking down an animal or even while we're glassing, like, do you mind if I kind of ask you some questions? Because if you don't kind of open that door and communicate that that's your mindset, the guide is probably going to assume that you're probably like what I would guess would be the majority of clients who don't necessarily want that. And therefore the guide is not generally there with a teacher's mindset, if that's a
Sure.
fair way to put it, right? The guy's there as a hunter and with a job to do. And that job is generally more focused on fulfilling the expectation of the hunter, which means hunting success, not necessarily on educating the hunter unless they know that that's what the hunter wants. Does that make sense?
No, it makes total sense, and I appreciate you saying that because I guess I didn't think about it that way. Like, obviously, I know that the guide's job is to put us onto animals and then do whatever else, help break down the animal, pack it out, that kind of stuff. But I don't know, maybe it's just my mentality, but like I'm thinking that the guide would be like, hey, this is what we're going to do, and here's why we're going to do it. So you saying that kind of makes a lot of sense, and I'll definitely be willing to kind of ask some questions and say, hey, what's is there a reason why we're approaching it this way, or why are we glassing from here versus oh, that other ridge, right? That kind of thing. So
Mm-hmm.
no, I totally get it.
And I'm sure that you get this. There can be a wrong time to ask questions. Like sometimes the best time to ask the question is afterwards, not before or during,
Sure.
right? Like, hey, not why are we doing this, but maybe we did a thing. We glassed a certain place this morning. We whatever, and it's after the fact when things,
Hmm.
are not quote unquote in the moment that you can be like, hey, like, do you mind sharing like why we did this or why we moved or why, whatever. And again, that obviously can be taken to extreme where you're just pestering the guide. I don't think you would do that, but I would
Right.
just say I would have what I've perceived of your attitude and what you want out of this hunt. I think there would be a good chance that you can go kill an animal, but not get all of the learning and the experience and the information you wanted out of it
Hmm.
unless you're proactive about making sure that you get it, like making sure that the guide can sense that you want that.
Sure.
I guess that's where I'm at. Like you could go have a great hunt and kill an animal, but maybe not get all the information or experience or as much hands-on like breaking down or as much hands-on packing out. That's probably not going to happen unless you're proactive about letting the guide know that that's what you want.
Cool. Yeah, no, I'll definitely be proactive then. It's a good piece of advice. Thanks.
Cool, man. Well, we could chat for hours more, I'm sure, but this is only part one, so I'm super excited to hear how this goes, to talk with you this fall and yeah, man, hear all about not just what you did learn and experience, but just some of the stories, the fun parts, the highs, the lows, and all that they get to share with your dad and uncles and everything. It's gonna be great.
I appreciate it, Mark, and I look forward to talking to you where I'm hopefully successful.
Well, best of luck to you, Zach, and listeners. Thank you for tuning in. Let us know how your season goes. Even if we haven't recorded a podcast by any means, it'd be great to hear from you, to have you send over some photos, share some success, or even just lessons learned to us by email. So reach out and do that if you have something to share, or if you have any questions for us, let us know as well. Again, the email address is podcast@exomountaingear.com. If you're enjoying the show, it would help us tremendously if you could share it with a friend or leave a rating or review in whatever podcast app that you're using. Best of luck to you guys this season on your adventures. Enjoy every second of the opportunity, and we'll talk to you soon.